You are at a wedding. Somewhere in the back, a song starts playing, and within seconds, something happens that nobody planned. People stand up. Not because anyone told them to, not because it makes any logical sense. They just stand up, walk to an open floor, and start moving their bodies in rhythm with a sequence of vibrations traveling through the air. Some of them are good at it. Most of them are not. Nobody cares. A 74-year-old grandmother is doing something with her hips that her doctor would probably advise against. A toddler is spinning in circles until she falls over, and you, standing at the edge of the room, feel something pulling at you, a physical urge to move even though nothing about your survival depends on it. No one is chasing you. No one is offering you food. There is no biological reason for your legs to want to do what they want to do right now, and yet they do. Every culture on Earth does this. Every single one. There is no known human society, past or present, that does not dance. Not one. So why does a species that spent 300,000 years trying not to die keep doing something that burns calories, serves no obvious survival function, and looks frankly ridiculous about half the time? If you're enjoying this so far, hype the video, hit that like button, and let's get into it. The answer is that dance might not be useless at all. It might be one of the oldest and most important things humans ever did, and the story of how we started doing it is stranger, older, and more deeply wired into your biology than you think. Let's start with what your body is doing when you hear a beat, because the first thing you need to understand about dance is that you do not choose to feel rhythm. Your brain does it for you, whether you want it to or not. In 2010, developmental psychologists Marcel Zentner and Tuomas Irola published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They played music to 120 infants between 5 and 24 months old. Babies, tiny humans who cannot walk, cannot talk, cannot tie a shoe, cannot do anything useful. And these babies spontaneously moved their bodies in rhythm with the music. Not perfectly, not on beat, but rhythmically. And here is the detail that matters. The babies did not move rhythmically in response to speech. Only music, only rhythm. And the babies who moved more closely in time with the beat smiled more. 5-month-old humans with zero training, zero cultural exposure to dance, zero understanding of what music even is, were already wired to move to a beat and to enjoy it. That is not learned behavior. That is hardware. Think about what that means for the invention of dance. You were born ready to do this, before you had language, before you had memories, before you could hold your own head up. Your brain was already listening for patterns in sound and preparing your body to respond. Dance was not something humans invented and then taught to their children. It was something children arrived with. But if dance is biological, if the impulse is built into the brain before any culture gets its hands on it, then the question is not really when humans invented dance. The question is why the biology is there at all. Why would evolution build a brain that wastes energy moving to a beat? Darwin had an answer. In The Descent of Man, published in 1871, he argued that music and rhythmic movement evolved through sexual selection. The same way a peacock's tail signals genetic fitness to a potential mate, a human who could move with coordination, creativity, and rhythm was advertising something. Health, motor control, neurological complexity. The ability to learn and reproduce intricate patterns. You dance well, you signal to every potential mate in the room that your brain and body work. You dance badly, well, that is information too. Darwin drew direct parallels between human courtship dances and the elaborate mating displays of birds, and he was not wrong about the parallel, but he was probably only seeing one piece of a much bigger picture. Because here's the thing about dance that Darwin's theory does not explain. People do not just dance to attract mates. They dance in groups. They dance at funerals, they dance before battles, they dance in circles around fires with people they have known their entire lives and have no intention of sleeping with. If dance were only about courtship, group dance makes no sense. But group dance is the most common form of dance on Earth, which means something else is going on. Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist at Oxford who proposed that the human brain can only maintain about 150 stable relationships, had a different theory. Dunbar knew that in primate societies, one-on-one grooming is the primary way individuals build social bonds. You pick parasites out of my fur, I pick parasites out of yours, and we both get a hit of endorphins that makes us feel connected and cooperative. But grooming has a limit. You can only groom one individual at a time. And as human groups grew beyond 50, beyond 100, beyond the point where one-on-one grooming could hold everyone together, humans needed a mechanism that could bond dozens or hundreds of people simultaneously. Dunbar's argument is that synchronized rhythmic movement, dancing together, singing together, Drumming together is that mechanism. In 2016, Bronwyn Tarr, Jacques Launay, and Dunbar published a study in Evolution and Human Behavior that specifically tested group dancing. They found that synchronized group dancing raised pain thresholds, a physiological proxy for endorphin release, and increased feelings of social bonding significantly more than dancing alone or moving out of sync. The synchrony was the key. Move together, in time, and your brain floods you with the same neurochemistry that evolution designed for intimate, one-on-one bonding. Except now you're doing it with 50 people at once. Dance is not cheesecake, dance is glue. Social glue that allowed human groups to grow larger than any other primate group on Earth. And for a species that survived by cooperating in groups, that glue was not optional. It was survival. Now, if you're thinking, wait, can animals dance? The answer is complicated. In 2009, neuroscientist Anirudh Patel at the Neurosciences Institute in San Diego published a study in Current Biology about a sulfur-crested cockatoo named Snowball. Snowball could bob his head and lift his feet in synchrony with a musical beat, and not just one tempo. When researchers changed the speed of the music, Snowball adjusted. That was the first controlled experimental evidence that any non-human animal could entrain to a beat. Patel proposed something called the vocal learning and rhythmic synchronization hypothesis. His argument was elegant. The ability to synchronize movement to an external beat requires a neural connection between the auditory system and the motor system. And that specific neural wiring exists in animals that are vocal learners, species that learn to mimic sounds like parrots, some songbirds, and humans. Dogs cannot do it. Cats cannot do it. Chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, have never demonstrated reliable beat synchronization in controlled experiments. But a cockatoo can, because the cockatoo's brain learned to listen and move at the same time. So did ours, which means the neurological foundation for dance may have existed in the animal kingdom for millions of years before humans started painting cave walls. And that brings us to the caves, because the oldest evidence of human dance is not a video. It is not a description. It is a painting. In the Bhimbetka rock shelters in Madhya Pradesh, India, discovered by archaeologist V.S. Wakankar in 1957, there are over 750 shelters containing paintings that span from roughly 30,000 years ago to the medieval period. Among them are Mesolithic paintings, roughly 10,000 to 5,000 years old, showing groups of human figures with arms raised, limbs linked, arranged in circular formations. They are dancing. You can see it. The bodies are in motion. The rhythm is frozen into rock. At the Adora Cave on Monte Pellegrino near Palermo, Sicily, engravings dating to roughly 11,000 to 14,000 years ago depict over a dozen human figures arranged in a circle, some with arched bodies, some wearing what appear to be masks or headdresses. The scene has been interpreted as a ritual dance, though some researchers have suggested acrobatics or initiation rites. It was discovered after a World War II ammunition dump exploded nearby and revealed the cave entrance. War accidentally showed us one of the oldest pictures of humans moving together in rhythm. At Trois Freres Cave in southern France, discovered in 1914 by the three sons of Count Henri Buguen, there is a figure painted and engraved roughly 3.5 meters above the cave floor, dated to about 13,000 years ago. It has the antlers of a deer, the ears of a stag, the eyes of an owl, the tail of a horse, and the legs of a human. It is in motion. The French prehistorian Henri Brill called it the sorcerer and interpreted it as a shaman performing a ritual dance. Whether that is exactly right, we cannot know, but something about the figure is unmistakable. It is a human body in a costume moving. That is performance. That is dance. At Cogul in Catalonia, Spain, discovered in 1908, a rock painting dated to roughly 10,000 to 5,000 years ago shows 9 women in skirts dancing in formation around a smaller male figure. At Tassili Nadjer in southeastern Algeria, brought to wider attention by French explorer Henri Lot in his 1959 book, over 15,000 rock art images span roughly 12,000 years, and among them are dozens of scenes showing human figures in group dance formations, some wearing elaborate headdresses. These are not isolated curiosities. Across continents that had no contact with each other, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, humans were painting the same thing. People moving together. So when did dance actually begin? The honest answer is, we do not know, and we may never know, because dance leaves no archaeological trace. A flute survives for 40,000 years. A drumstick does not. A body in motion leaves nothing behind unless someone paints it on a wall. And painting only started around 40,000 years ago. Dance is almost certainly far older than any image of it. Here is why. The physical equipment for dance has been in the human body for a very long time. The hyoid bone, a small horseshoe-shaped bone that anchors the tongue and throat muscles and enables complex vocalization, was found in a 60,000-year-old Neanderthal at Kibara Cave in what is now modern-day Israel. It was virtually identical to a modern human's DNA analysis, confirmed that Neanderthals carried the same variant of the FOXP2 gene that is linked to speech and language in modern humans. If they could vocalize, they could probably keep a beat. And if they could keep a beat, they could move to it. Stephen Mithen, an archaeologist at the University of Reading, published a book in 2005 called The Singing Neanderthals. He proposed that before modern language, before grammar and syntax and words, our ancestors communicated through a system he called holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic. A proto-language that relied on melody, pitch, rhythm, and bodily movement rather than discrete words. Not language, not music, not dance, something that was all three at once. If Mithen is right, then music, language, and dance are siblings, born from the same parent, separated by evolution, but still sharing the same DNA. And that parent is hundreds of thousands of years old. Think about what that means. Dance is not something humans started doing at some point in history. Dance is something that existed before history, before language, before art, before the very concept of before. Now let's talk about what happens inside your brain when you actually dance. Because the neuroscience is genuinely strange. In 2005, neuroscientist Beatriz Calvo-Marino at University College London put expert ballet dancers, expert capoeira dancers, and non-dancer controls into an fMRI scanner and showed them videos of both ballet and capoeira movements. Here's what she found. When ballet dancers watched ballet, their premotor cortex, supplementary motor area, and intraparietal sulcus lit up far more intensely than when they watched capoeira, and vice versa for capoeira dancers. Your brain does not just passively watch dance, it internally simulates the movements it knows how to do. When you watch someone dance, your motor system fires as if you were doing it yourself. That is why watching a great dancer gives you a physical sensation. Your body is rehearsing. Your muscles are twitching. Your brain is dancing with them. And in 2011, neuroscientists Valerie Salimpour and Robert Zatori at McGill University showed that music triggers dopamine release in the striatum, the same reward circuitry your brain uses for food, for sex, for anything it considers essential. And the dopamine fires in two stages. The caudate nucleus activates before the musical climax when you're anticipating what comes next. And the nucleus accumbens fires at the moment of resolution, when the pattern completes. Your brain rewards you for predicting rhythm correctly. Dance is a prediction game played with your entire body, and your brain treats winning that game the same way it treats eating when you're hungry. But dance is not just about what happens in one brain, it is about what happens between brains. And this is where the story connects to something ancient. In the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa, the San Bushmen have practiced the healing trance dance for thousands of years. Anthropologist Lorna Marshall documented it in The Kung of Nye in 1976. Richard Katz described the mechanics in Boiling Energy in 1982. The dance works like this. Women sit in a circle, clapping and singing medicine songs. Healers, men and women, dance around them for hours. The sustained rhythmic movement and hyperventilation induce an altered state of consciousness the Kung call Kia. Healers report that their spiritual energy called boils up the spine. They tremble, they sweat, they touch the sick, and believe they are drawing out illness. Katz found that roughly half of Kung men and a third of women were trained healers capable of entering this state. This is not theater. This is a technology for altering consciousness through sustained rhythmic movement, and the San Bushmen are one of the oldest continuous cultural groups on Earth. David Lewis Williams at the University of the Witwatersrand studied rock art in the Drakensberg Mountains of South Africa and found figures in postures that closely matched the trance dance, bodies bent, arms extended, noses bleeding, exactly the physical signs that accompany Kia. Some of that rock art may be several thousand years old. The dance itself is almost certainly older, and it is not just the San. In Aboriginal Australian communities, corroboree dances have been performed for tens of thousands of years. Aboriginal Australians have inhabited Australia for at least 65,000 years, based on dating at the Madjed B rock shelter published by Chris Clarkson and colleagues in Nature in 2017. Their ceremonial dances serve as history, law, navigation, initiation, healing, and connection to the dreamtime. Knowledge that in Western cultures would be stored in books and libraries is stored. In Aboriginal culture, in movement. The dance is the database. In ancient Egypt, dance was inseparable from religion. Hathor, one of the most widely worshipped deities, was the goddess of music, joy, and dance. Priestesses played the sistrum, a sacred bronze rattle, and danced in temple ceremonies. Tomb paintings in the Valley of the Nobles at Thebes, in tombs like that of Nakht from the 18th dynasty around 1400 BC, show female musicians and dancers at banquets. Professional dance troupes called khener were attached to temples and royal courts. Mu dancers performed in funeral processions wearing tall reed headdresses. The Egyptians painted dancers onto the walls of tombs so that music and movement would follow the dead into eternity. They did not consider dance entertainment. They considered it essential equipment for the afterlife. In ancient Greece, dance was not optional. It was education. Plato, in Laws, stated flatly that the man who sings and dances well is the good man. He classified dances into those of peace and those of war. The Pyrrhic, a war dance performed in full armor, simulating attack and defense, was featured at the Panathenaic festival and was considered essential military training. The Dithyramb, a circular choral dance performed by 50 men or boys in honor of Dionysus, is credited by Aristotle as the origin of Greek tragedy. Theater itself was born from a dance circle. The chorus in a Greek play did not just sing, they moved. In India, the Natya Shastra, attributed to the sage Bharata Muni and dated between roughly 200 BC and 200 AD, codified dance into one of the most sophisticated systems of bodily expression ever created. 108 Karanas, units of dance combining body movement, hand gesture, and foot position. 24 single hand gestures. 13 combined hand gestures. 8 emotional flavors called rasas. An entire vocabulary of meaning, written in muscle and bone, detailed enough to express any human emotion without a single word. The text claims that Brahma himself created drama by combining elements from the 4 Vedas, and that dance is the physical manifestation of the divine. Temple dancers called devadasis, women dedicated to a deity, performed these sacred dances for centuries. The tradition was ancient, with inscriptions referencing temple dancers dating to the Chola dynasty, roughly the 9th to 13th century AD. At the Brihadiswara temple in Thanjavur, built by Raja Chola I around 101 AD, there were dedicated quarters for 400 temple dancers. 400. In China, Confucius considered proper music and dance, what the Chinese called yayu, essential for social harmony and moral cultivation. The wrong music could destabilize a state. The Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 256 BC, established the 6 great dances performed at court for different ceremonial occasions. And in the Tang dynasty, Emperor Xuanzong established the Pear Garden around the 8th century AD, a court institution for training dancers and musicians, sometimes called the first conservatory in Chinese history. In the 13th century AD, the Persian Sufi mystic Rumi inspired what would become one of the most distinctive spiritual dances in human history. After his death in 1273, the Mevlevi order formalized the Sema ceremony. Whirling dervishes, spinning counterclockwise with arms extended, right palm facing upward to receive divine grace, left palm facing downward to pass it to the earth. The spinning is not performance, it is prayer, a sustained rotational meditation designed to dissolve the ego and connect the individual soul to the infinite. The ceremony was banned in Turkey in 1925 under Ataturk's secularization reforms, permitted again as a cultural event in 1953, and inscribed by UNESCO on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2008. Think about that arc. From a cave painting of masked figures in southern France, 13,000 years old, to a whirling dervish in Turkey, 750 years old, to a grandmother at a wedding tonight. The settings change, the costumes change, the gods change, but the fundamental act, a human body moving in rhythm in a shared space for a purpose that transcends the physical, that has not changed. Not once. And there is a historian who tried to explain why. William McNeill, in his 1995 book Keeping Together in Time, Dance and Drill in Human History, introduced a concept he called muscular bonding. McNeill argued that when groups of people move together in time, participants experience a euphoric sense of collective identity that overrides individual concerns. He traced this from tribal war dances through military drill, religious ceremonies, and factory work. McNeill drew on his own experience of basic training during World War II. He described the inexplicable sense of well-being and group unity that synchronized marching produced. He could not explain it psychologically, he just knew it was real. Moving in unison with strangers made them stop being strangers. And speaking of military drill, Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, understood the power of synchronized movement better than almost anyone in history. He performed in over 40 ballets himself, appearing in more than 80 roles from age 14 to age 32. His most famous role was as the sun in the Ballet de la Nuit in 1653, a spectacle lasting 13 hours, performed when he was just 14, in which Louis appeared as the rising sun that banishes darkness. It was not a hobby. It was statecraft. In 1661, he founded the Académie Royale de Danse, the first professional dance institution in Europe, which standardized ballet technique and established the 5 basic positions codified by his ballet master, Pierre Beauchamp. Court life at Versailles required competence in dance. Nobles who could not dance well were marginalized. The king controlled the court by controlling the choreography. Dance was politics performed with the body. Now here is something that brings all of this together. In the 1960s and 1970s, folklorist Alan Lomax launched the Choreometrics project at Columbia University, working with dance analyst Irmgard Bartnieff and anthropologist Forestine Paulet. They filmed dance performances from over 200 cultures worldwide and developed a coding system to analyze movement across multiple dimensions. Body parts used, flow of energy, degree of variation, use of space, group interaction, and they found something remarkable. Dance style correlated strongly with a culture's economic system and social structure. Hunter-gatherer dances used the whole body with free-flowing movement and high variation. Hierarchical agricultural societies produced dances with more trunk rigidity, controlled limb movement, and strict group synchrony. Cultures with similar social structures danced in similar ways, even when separated by oceans and centuries of isolation. The body knows what the society is, and it dances accordingly. Kurt Sachs, the German musicologist, had intuited something similar in 1933 when he published Eine Weltgeschichte des Tanzes, translated into English in 1937 as World History of the Dance. It was the first comprehensive attempt to trace dance across all cultures and historical periods. Sachs argued that the most ancient dances were convulsive, ecstatic, and circular, associated with trance and spiritual possession. More controlled, linear, formalized dances developed later, as societies became more stratified and hierarchical. He wrote that dance is the mother of the arts. Because music and poetry exist in time, painting and architecture exist in space, but dance lives at once in time and space. His evolutionary framework has been criticized since, but his central observation, that dance exists in every human culture he could find, has never been contradicted. And in 2019, a massive cross-cultural study led by Samuel Mayer at Harvard, published in Science, analyzed ethnographic data from the Human Relations Area files covering 315 diverse societies from every inhabited continent. The finding was unambiguous. Music exists in every known human culture. Dance accompanies song in the vast majority of those cultures. Dance songs are universally faster and more rhythmically regular than other songs. Lullabies are universally slower and more melodic. There is more variation in musical and movement styles within a single society than between different societies on opposite sides of the planet. That is not a coincidence. That is a species-wide trait. And if you need one more piece of evidence that dance is biological rather than cultural, consider this. Beat deafness, the inability to synchronize movement to a musical beat, is a real condition. Cognitive neuroscientist Jessica Phillips Silver and colleagues published a study in Neuropsychology in 2011, documenting a case they gave the pseudonym Matu. Matu could perceive melody perfectly well. He could hear music just fine, but he could not find the beat. He could not move in time with rhythm no matter how hard he tried. And beat deafness is extraordinarily rare. Current estimates suggest it affects roughly 2 to 3% of the population. The other 97% of humanity can feel a beat and move to it without any training whatsoever. When a deficit is that rare, the ability it disrupts is not a skill. It is a default setting. And then there is the Mohenjo-Daro dancing girl, a bronze statue, just 10.5 centimeters tall, discovered during excavations led by John Marshall in 1926 at Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, in what is now Pakistan. She is roughly 4,500 years old, dating to approximately 2,500 BC. Made using the lost wax casting technique, one of the earliest known examples of that method. She stands with one hand on her hip, her arm loaded with bangles, her posture confident and dynamic. Marshall described her as a girl in the pose of a dancer. Whether she is frozen mid-step or simply standing with attitude, she is evidence that one of the world's earliest urban civilizations valued the aesthetics of the human body in motion enough to cast it in bronze and keep it. But there is one more piece of this story, one that ties dance to the concert hall before the concert. In Paleolithic France, archaeoacoustician Igor Reznikov spent years mapping painted caves in the Dordogne and Ariege regions. What he found changed how we think about cave art. The locations of prehistoric paintings correlated strongly with areas of high acoustic resonance. The painters chose walls where sound echoed and amplified. And in those resonant chambers, specific stalactites and rock formations showed clear signs of repeated striking. Percussion marks, when hit with a bone or stone, those formations produce deep, bell-like tones that resonate through the limestone chambers. Our ancestors were using the caves themselves as instruments. Imagine standing in pitch darkness, surrounded by paintings of bison and horses, while someone strikes a stalactite and the entire chamber hums around you. And you move. Not because someone tells you to, because the sound is in the stone and the stone is in your bones and your body does not know how to hear rhythm without answering it. So here's the answer. How did humans invent dance? They did not invent it the way you invent a wheel or a plow. Dance was not a single discovery in a single place. It emerged independently everywhere, because the biological infrastructure for it was already built into the human body and brain long before anyone carved the first drum or painted the first cave wall. 5-month-old infants move rhythmically to music before they can speak. The brain releases dopamine and endorphins in response to synchronized movement. The mirror neuron system simulates dance in the body of every watcher. The physics of vibrating objects produces mathematical rhythmic patterns that the human auditory motor system is hardwired to detect and respond to. Beat deafness affects less than 3% of the population. Every known human culture on Earth dances. Every single one. The Sand Bushmen danced for healing. The Egyptians danced for their gods. The Greeks danced for war. The Indians danced for the divine. The Chinese danced for order. The Sufis danced for union with the infinite. Aboriginal Australians danced to remember the shape of the land itself. None of these traditions learned from each other. They arrived at dance independently because the human body demands it. Was dance invented once and spread from a single origin? The probability is essentially zero. The archaeological record, the neuroscience, the cross-cultural data, the evolutionary biology, and the infant studies all converge on the same conclusion. Dance is a biological inevitability. The probability that any human culture with functioning limbs, a functioning auditory system, and access to rhythmic sound would eventually develop dance is above 95%. It is as close to certain as biology gets. The impulse is in the hardware. The culture just decides the choreography. But here is the part that stays with me. Somewhere around 13,000 years ago, in a cave in southern France, someone put on a mask with antlers, stood in front of a painted wall, and moved. Not to hunt, not to fight, not to survive. To become something other than themselves, if only for a moment. And right now, tonight, somewhere on this planet, a mother is bouncing a baby on her hip. The baby is not crying, the baby is smiling. Not because the mother is speaking, but because she is swaying. Rhythm first, words later. We danced before we talked, and 300,000 years later, we still cannot hear a beat without wanting to answer it with our bodies. We did not invent dance. Dance is what happens when a species evolves a body that can hear time and a heart that refuses to sit still inside it. Now drop a comment and tell us, what should we try next? And if you have not already, make sure to like and share, hit that subscribe button, and check out the video appearing on your screen right now. We will see you there.